Here. Uh, Hello.
Hey,
Oidav, are you there?
yes, I am.
Hey, we got this to work. Technical difficulties beset us in this computer age, right?
No worries.
Yeah, here we are. I'm going to turn my volume up so you can hear me a little better. Um,
Uh, your voice sounds much better than before.
Great. So glad to hear it. So we are live. Friends of Mongolia interviews number 2. You're the second person I'm interviewing. Mr. Oidav Vavanchik, an entrepreneur and a disability activist, a friend of mine, someone I've come to respect, a big name in the world of disability rights and policy formulation in Mongolia. So honored to have you. To all our friends in Mongolia, I say Senbatskano Ogluni Mint. I know it is early on Saturday morning over there, so I appreciate you tuning in to hear this interview. Just so you understand who we are at Friends of Mongolia, we're an organization dedicated to supporting improved lives, especially in educational outcomes for Mongolians. We run a small grants program that provides small amounts of money to NGOs to run projects like financial literacy, combating domestic abuse, setting up businesses, environmental cleanups, that sort of thing. We also do a big scholarship program, or it's been existed for about 15 or 16 years, and we're in the process right now of handing out the new scholarships. These are for students from the countryside to study in the city, and we also do things like this, building intercultural cooperation between the U.S. and Mongolia. And part of that is because Friends of Mongolia was founded by returned Peace Corps volunteers who served in Mongolia. There have been hundreds over the years. So a lot of times we'll come back from Mongolia and we're charged up. We've been teachers, we've been health professionals, we've worked on small businesses and environmental programs, and we want to do more. So Friends of Mongolia is an organization that allows us, in addition to whatever full-time jobs or grad school work, whatever else we're doing, to put a little bit of time in to support the Mongolian community and to highlight the excellent work that Mongolians and others are doing in Mongolia to support and appreciate and recognize the wonderful country that Mongolia is. So today we have Mr. Oidavanchik. If you don't mind, I might go over a few things that and thanks for joining me so early from Mongolia. If you don't mind, I want to go over a few of your achievements. You started an organization called Rectus. It is the only company that sells disability and rehabilitation devices for people with disability in Mongolia. You were also worked for Mercy Corps Mongolia on a disability project, and you'd even had come over to the United States on a high-level international visitors leadership program related to access in Mongolia. So maybe you could take a couple minutes and introduce yourself. Tell us about some of your work and some of your achievements.
Well, thank you, Ariel, for inviting me for this great live session, and it's been a great honor for me to be second person interviewed by you. Well, it's also a great time I spent with Friends of Mongolia back in a few years, just before leaving Mongolia, because if you remember, I was also board member of the Friends of Mongolia. And
That's right.
definitely really appreciate what the Friends of Mongolia does for Mongolian people and Mongolian future kids. Well, shortly about me. I mean, I've been living in 1/3 of my life in different countries, including Russia, Switzerland, and United States, and spent about 10 years doing business and about another 15 years doing international works. Well, my international work started with actually with the American NGO called Wheels for Humanity. It's based in North California. I started this work when I was just 17 years old and when I was in hospital in the States. Later on, I used to work with Mercy Corps International Development NGO, supported by USAID and different other donors. And now I'm working as an entrepreneur. I'm working as a CEO and founder of the Rectus company that you mentioned. The company is not only focused on disability, it's also overall it's focused on inclusiveness and supporting the family members who care somebody in their home. My mission is to bring the cutting-edge products, technologies from the different parts of the world so that people in Mongolia could take care of their family members more efficiently, not just by physical and mechanical works. Because I've seen a lot of things that we could do in Mongolia, but so far nobody was had a courage to do that in Mongolia. I mean, in the terms of technology. So that's the mission of the company, and that's briefly about me. I have 3 beautiful girls and 1 good dog who is barking outside, actually.
Yeah, no, I hear you with the kids. They're here, and I'm inconveniencing everybody by being on Facebook Live and messing around with the computer, and they just want to enjoy the weekend and get rowdy the way that kids do. One of the reasons I wanted to ask you to speak to you is because you're a remarkable individual, I think, and part of that relates to the state of disability in Mongolia, if you know what I'm talking about. I think you've seen in the United States, there are a lot of it's in people's minds. People are aware there are people with disability. It's accepted part of life. We see people with disability in schools, in universities, in business, in government, in all sectors of life, and it's less so in Mongolia. So that was something I wanted to briefly ask you about. Is sort of what are some of your impressions about the state of society with regard to disability in Mongolia, and when I say that, I'm talking about specific things like access to schools, just even anywhere, you know, the inclusion in the schools, access into buildings, things like that, places at university. What are some of those issues that you're seeing that are kind of some of the big issues related to disability in Mongolia today?
Well, first I should say that the person with disability is not from other planet. The person has exactly the similar problems, similar issues, and same happiness and same worries as any other normal person. Let's call it normal. Honestly, there is no normal person in this world anyway.
That's true.
When I was in a trip in the United States, learning about ADA, American Disability Act, what I figured out is that United States was not aware about disability issues until the Vietnam War. They were not really much
Oh,
focusing on that. And just after that, when a lot of veterans came up from the war to back to the United States and raised up a lot of questions, it's roughly in the 17th. Only in
yeah,
that time,
1970s. Yeah.
yes, in the United States, started working something about the disability issues, and that's where Judith came up, and a lot of other current big figures came up also. So that people in the United States were just easier to understand. I would say Mongolia is exactly now like in mid of 70s United States. We are just getting aware about disability. We're just getting aware that, hey, we have somebody who is in our neighborhood who is disabled, and that person should be have different attitude and should be considered in a community life. So we have been working on different stuff, including education, health, care service, accessibility, apologize, a number of issues which is surrounded by disabled people. But it's just only, grounding up. It's like just grass, no trees yet up.
Okay.
So about saying more specifically, school access to education. Honestly saying, none of the schools in Mongolia now is fully accessible for students. None of the kindergartens are fully accessible for kids. But we have just last year we set up the first, let's say, model school with the support of Japanese foundations, which is a fully inclusive, fully accessible. But that's the only one school among the 1,000 schools in Mongolia. About the kindergartens, exactly the same issues. Few kindergartens trying to be accessible, inclusive, not only physically, but also inclusive by attitude towards to the parents and kids with disabilities. And that's just a few attempts, probably one or five. About the universities and healthcare centers, I mean, we're just learning to how to make ramps, and still we haven't.
Yes,
We
I've
still
noticed
haven't
that.
got that.
I,
Well,
I've seen that in Mongolia where there's supposedly a wheelchair ramp, but it's not like this. It's like this, and I'm thinking, how
yeah,
can someone in a wheelchair go up like that? It's yeah,
we are kind of getting along with that. I would say I mean, I was working with many different countries like Sri Lanka, India, and other countries as well. I mean, everything can be seen as a comparison. I would say Mongolia is like in a real in the middle work.
yeah,
We are not worse than some countries, but we're definitely still many years of work ahead compared to, let's say, States or Switzerland or Sweden or United Kingdom.
yeah. That sounds that when you're saying that, that makes sense to me. So, but let's talk about that for a second. You did want to there. You came to the United States. You learned about the American Disabilities Act, the wounded veterans who came back who needed access, who had various disabilities from combat disabilities, basically. Um, but in Mongolia, weren't you involved with helping them to pass a similar law, not an Americans with Disabilities Act, but something like Mongolians with Disabilities Act? Has that
Yeah.
passed? And then what's been the effect of that? Has that changed people's minds a little bit?
Well, the law was just passed just before the kind of COVID issue started up.
Oh, great.
Mm, I was one of the I have to say editors who worked on this law. Definitely, a lot of other organizations worked together to put up this law. It's um it's we call like a sister or a small brother of ADA. Actually, not
Okay.
only Mongolia, also Koreans adopted ADA, and it's called DDA. Disability Discrimination Act, something like that. I was learning about DDA
Okay.
also about a few years ago in Korea too. So that experience helped me to work with Mongolian ADA version law. But we have to be concrete that American way of creating law and implementing is a bit different than Mongolian way of creating and following up that law. ADA is a kind of bill that everyone should consider whenever they do different laws. While in Mongolia, it was a separate law, which is supported by government and ratified by members of Great Choral. But a lot of implementing issues with this law still are stagnating, not going through. So many things that were written up in the law still on the papers, but not in the life, because we still
Okay.
have waiting for a number of documents that should come along with that law.
Okay. So you mean in terms
Uh,
of funding or in terms of creating access in terms of like schools and jobs and other agencies making accommodations? It's a very big deal in the United States to have the accommodations, meaning if you're somebody with a disability of any different type and you're on the job, they have to create a workspace that allows you to access it, and that doesn't mean just wheelchairs. In the United States, there are vehicles sometimes that allow you, a person in a wheelchair, to drive the vehicle using your hands, and then also a special parking spot and a lot of different things. Um, is it these types of things you're talking about, or?
That's the really actually the fruits to getting to the customers. Actually, we're missing the lot of middle stuff. Middle, let's say the Discrimination Act says, well, kids in the school shouldn't be anyhow discriminated depending on
Yeah.
their physical abilities, but it should somehow refer to the law of education. Well, right now, just a year ago, there was a decree by Minister of the Education, which proved, or let's say, double proved that uh, AD Disability Act law. So this is just one example. For example, and that was 2 years afterwards. Then afterwards, when the law was ratified. So. Uh, and another example is the law says, well, all public transportation should be accessible for people, any kind of people, but there's nothing is written up on the law for transportation or infrastructure. So there is no right now really clear connection with the sub laws. That's
I
what
see
we're
what you
missing
mean.
on. That's what
So
we're
they made
missing
it.
on.
You're
And
saying there's
also,
this framework, but they don't have, okay, there's a law where we're supporting people with disabilities, but in terms of the specifics, how are you going to support people with disability in terms of transportation, in terms of jobs, in terms of education,
yeah,
in
yes,
terms of
yes.
buses? I mean, that's a simple thing, even in the buses in Mongolia. There's some good buses, but in the way that the United States, there's a ramp that comes down and you can roll your wheelchair on and come back, and the bus driver has to secure you. I haven't seen that in Mongolia.
It's unfortunately it's still far away until we gonna have such a buses. Unfortunately, we have a one or two buses which goes from Tawanshar to after. It's a I'm saying in Mongolian because a lot of you guys probably know the places, and it's a
We probably do.
yeah,
Pretty far.
one floor bus, but we lack of training with the drivers who would work with the disabled people there. So, and
It's difficult.
actually, while I was in the States, I learned a really great principle that the United States did, which is called federal dollar principle. Have you
Okay,
heard about
let's
it?
talk about that.
Okay,
I
federal
have not,
dollar is
but go ahead.
yeah, it's the principle, or I don't know, some idea that whenever government gives some money to companies or anybody else, they say, you guys using my dollars, so you have to follow whatever goals we have,
Ah,
including ADA. So, for example, if we're giving a part of financial support to companies as a bid or tender, we say whatever you build up should be follow along with the ADA. And in this way,
right.
we kind of, yes, in this way, we kind of saving up the government money, but same time reaching up our goals to provide an inclusive environment. That's
That's right.
the, that,
There's a contracting rules. You're right. There's a lot. There are a lot of rules like that for federal government. There's minority or women-owned businesses. There's ADA compliant. There's veteran-owned businesses, and now they're even creating for specific projects that are going to be implemented in lands controlled by tribal governments and tribal communities.
yes,
There's
yes,
you must hire people that are native to this area, and you must provide services and according to X, Y, and Z. So you're right. That's a really good thing. It's a way to incentivize. When you create such things, people find a way to comply. So I would agree with you
yeah,
that that's
that's the thing. So what I'm trying to let understand our politicians and to follow it, because in this way, Mongolia is not a rich country as any like states. So we have to be definitely very saving country, but same time not forget about the people needs and reach certain goals about inclusiveness. So that's the one of the best way how we can do that. Because right now what we do is just giving money on some issues, but then following up and saying you didn't do that, so you have to do that, and giving another bunch of money to change the environment. But the issue with the disabilities is not about only accessibility. It's also very much based on human resource, human capital. As you know, Mongolia is just a 2.3 million, no, 3.2 million population, and it's not a big, but we're trying to have a lot of professionals who would work with disabled people. So in with the efforts of that, we set up the first occupational therapy bachelor course, and
That's
we
great.
now have a fourth, I think, graduation of the occupational therapists in Mongolia. And that's really now really much demanded in Mongolian hospital health systems. Now we're also working with the ADB, Asian Development Bank, and created a working with a huge project that supporting creation of development centers in the 6 provinces of Mongolia.
Wow, that's
And
wonderful.
yes, idea is that countryside people, people living in the rural areas would come to that development center and be able to receive certain services for their kids, because that's the key for the future of solving the problems with the disabled people. Right now, Mongolia is really in the back about the kindergarten issues and pre-education system for disabled kids. So that's the one of the goals that this ADB cooperation project's trying to solve.
That sounds really great, and that's an issue that I was on almost at the front of my mind. Is really maybe because I was in a teacher in Mongolia, and so my heart's always going out to the kids. And I know I've spoken to parents in different parts of Mongolia, because I lived there 2 years as a Peace Corps volunteer, and 2 years I was working with the embassy as well in their public affairs section, which is how I got this idea, because public affairs does a lot of good interviews. Um, Hello to my colleagues out there. But for the kids, especially, I would speak to parents, I would speak to relatives, and they would tell me, you know, at different points across those different 4 years, people would tell me, it seems like they don't want my kid in the school for whatever reason. Or they're saying you have to be there with your child in the back, making sure he or she is okay the whole time. And it's like the teachers don't want to, welcome them in, and then the attitude from the teachers, of course, that's going right to the students. So they would say, we wish we could do more for them. But that brings me to another topic I wanted to talk about, which is the idea of disability, right? So in the United States, there's now, as you said, this is a very much an acceptance. There's more of this idea as people with disability are a community, right? They're members of a community. Just
Right.
like, and this includes, I know there were some friends of mine who attended Gallaudet University, which is
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
deaf and hard of hearing people.
Mhm.
And I did some part-time work over there. There was a model middle school for the deaf, and actually there were parents, Mongolian children. They said, we need somebody who can speak decent Mongolian. And at that time I could speak pretty good Mongolian. I speak okay now. But and so it was sort of like, they had someone who translate from American Sign Language into English, and then from English I would translate into Mongolian. Mongolians would tell me something, and then I would say it in English, and then they would do the signs. But the feeling I got from friends, even now I know some friends who are Mongolian, who are part of the deaf and hard of hearing community, is that it's a culture. It's a culture on its own. And I'll tell you,
Yeah.
sometimes I
Yeah.
was on campus and I felt a little bit jealous, like, oh, they have this culture. It's this great kind of unique thing. They're able to communicate with each other in this way. And I wish I could be part of it. Almost like that. Like, I wish I could do better with the sign language. But in any case, yeah, the point is it's accepted as its own community. And I'm not sure if that's the case in Mongolia, where people with disability are seen as part of their own community, or if it's more of like, oh, there's something wrong that needs to be fixed. And I think that that's a little bit problematic because, you know, in my mind, people are people, as you said. We should accept people. But how do you
Well,
see?
you raised a very philosophical question, actually. It's well, we have to clear that understanding of disability and inclusion is actually came up from the mostly Western world, and it's very much based on dignity and equal rights, which is a very basis of Western mindset, right?
Yeah,
While Mongolia is still Eastern country with a hierarchical society and completely different values. We have to be clear on that, and it's not
yeah,
always also easy to copy up, copy some issues and bring up to Mongolia.
this is true.
The view of thinking or seeing some stuff as a dignity or freedom and all this stuff, it's still getting along with Mongolians. And Mongolia is fortunately one of the pioneers in this way, because we one of the first Asian countries who accepted democracy, right? So in this way, it's getting okay, but still, disabled people somehow relate, somehow kidnap, and it's still considered not really like a culture yet. Some people, if you go rural areas, still accept it as like a bad luck from the, you know, for bad karma kind of stuff,
Uh,
not good luck or some stuff. And this is something that should be fixed. Well,
but you
in the
know,
city,
no, go ahead.
but in the, yes, in the cities, you know, like Ulaanbaatar, then in major cities, is considered like a disabled people, something that you could have at any time. You can play basketball and break your leg, and then you got it disabled. So this is like a human natural process.
You're
So
bringing up
that's
something that actually that's making me think of something else. First thing that comes to mind is there are elderly people who lose their ability they're less mobile, right? It's just a fact. Elderly anywhere in the world, you know. And are we saying, or are they now going to be in the same category? Or are you accepting, hey, this person is elder, so they're less mobile. Maybe they don't hear as well. Their vision isn't as good. Are we going to say now that they're not any good anymore? Do you see what I mean? So it's I think it's maybe how you think of it. If you think of a young person in a wheelchair in the same way you think of an older person in a wheelchair, that's but the other point I think of is this: Mongolia did really well with Paralympics, with Special Olympics. You have athletes. Wheelchair basketball. I think the embassy ran something on wheelchair basketball once. You had some really great athletes.
yeah.
So is the sports changing things a little bit? I mean, I've seen people. You know, I'm friends with a lot of Mongolians on Facebook. I saw a lot of people celebrating the medalists from the Special Olympics and from the Paralympics.
Yeah, I mean, Achilles International is one of my friends who runs up this local NGO. Uh, she is doing great job of kind of changing the perception of disability through the sports, running up marathons, and that I would say that work goes quite well. And another my friend who is also running up NGO called Bichatna We Can. She does a great job
Yes.
changing the perception of looking at disability issues through the arts and different cultural events and cultural actions. She did the first, what's called model, not model, Miss. What was that? You remember? I think we were together on that.
Yeah, yeah. I know, it's kind of like a beauty pageant.
Yeah, something like that. That was completely new way of looking at the disabled people. And Saran Chulun, when she does this through the sport, she does it so enthusiastically, and that's great. I mean, that's how individually some people or some NGOs trying to change this perception, looking disabled people as like a bad karma or bad luck, some stuff. Well, and other NGOs also working towards to changing that through the laws, through the advocacy works, and some participatory learning trainings, and that's the things that I would say going well. And as I said, we are not definitely really in the backwards of the world progress. We are just in the middle. We're still
Yeah,
learning
so
a lot of.
that this, and I very much support you. And you're right. Yeah, Ms. Saranchol on the Achilles running group, they are fantastic. I was part of their run twice. One year I did 5K, and then one year I ran with my son for
Yeah,
the,
yeah,
what is it, the Hope and Possibility Run, Nadver Balamsh, I think it's called, that run. That's really great.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
And I know
fun.
she has a relationship with the group in the United States. Um, but that brings me, I think, to one of the last questions that I have, and I know we're talking a little bit long, but I think it's a good conversation. Um,
I mean,
what are
any of our mutual friend says, great conversation, friends. And there's a one guy in
any?
basketball says, 100 years anniversary of modern education development in Mongolia to you, to teacher Ariel. And there's a Linda.
That's
Linda
right.
is on board too. She's been in Mongolia actually twice too, if I remember. She was bringing up a guide dog training.
That's right. And they had one of the first guide dogs for Miss Oyanga, who was at the embassy. I think it was the first guide dog in Mongolia, and so we should mention her too.
Yeah.
But Annie, yeah, she's done work I think with you, right, on disability. She's a stellar individual, Leviani
No,
Tolkien.
actually, Ariel.
Oh, she hasn't.
She did it by herself. I just came
Oh,
up when
Fulbright.
she was yeah, when she was nearly completed her work. I just came on one of the
Ah.
research points. But
Oh, you
since
worked with
that time,
Charles. You worked with
sorry?
Charles, didn't you? You worked with Charles Kellett at the State Department, right? Did you know
Yeah, yeah,
Charles? Okay.
yeah, yeah.
But the last thing I was going to ask you is, in terms of current resources, like what if somebody is watching, if somebody is hearing today, and they say, you know what, um, I think I need resources for somebody in my family or for my child. What is available in Mongolia? How do I find it? Who can I talk to? That's a very important question. So if someone says, okay, which AMEGs are you in, or in UB, what are the centers they can go to, or the phone numbers, or the websites?
You mean some needed stuff? You mean ADL, like aid
Yeah.
for daily
So if
living?
Right. So if somebody needs mobility assistance, or if somebody wants to start a conversation at their school, if they're having if they want someone to talk to their teacher for them, or if they have an older relative who needs a wheelchair or some mobility devices, or somebody was injured and they need some kind of help, or anything like that, or just they want to have a conversation on inclusion with their,
Right,
with
right,
say the
right.
municipality or whatever.
Well,
What's out there?
let's imagine there's one family in one of the rural countrysides, and they're having some member with the disability in the family, and they want to change some stuff. First, they can go to the local governance service and ask for the support, because right now, because of the laws and uh, social works and advocacy works done by government of Mongolia, any government level officials never can refuse or never can say go away to that family members. True or
That's
not
good.
true, but it should be accepted. It should be accepted as some the issue should be accepted and address it somehow. So this is especially very powerful on IMEC level, provincial level. Every province has a certain board next to the governor of the province, and they should react on this issue. That's the first. Second, every government level has a this social service authorities who should receive these questions and address back to the family on this. And on a state level, we do have a special agency next to the Ministry of Social Welfare and Labor, purely designed for issues for disabled people.
Yeah, that's great.
It's not the interministerial agency, but it's under one ministry. But still, the agency should and that's designed to work with that people, and it works with the mostly with the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education and sub agencies like uh, rehabilitation centers and education centers and the schools. So that's
Yeah.
the main government body who is related to most close government body relation to the disabled person. Well, on the state level also, we now have a advisor to the Minister of Mongolia, Prime Minister of Mongolia. Maybe you know Mr. Undral Pat, who was leading the NGO called Living Independent Center in Mongolia. He's now
The name sounds familiar. The organization sounds familiar, but I'm not sure I know the individual.
Okay, he's now official advisor to the Prime Minister.
That's good
So
news.
that's the age on a government service level or public service level. About the ADL, aid for daily living. Well, probably I can say that probably my company is the only which would work on ADL issues, while other medical supply companies mostly work with medical instruments and medical issues,
Okay.
medical supplement issues. While I do work with American and British, Chinese, Russian, and different other companies, about the 20 companies which I constantly work as a supply chain. So if the person needs some stuff, definitely I can bring any from any part of the world. But
Tell us the name of your company again. Tell us the name of your company.
Yeah, my company name is Rectus. It's
Rectus.
a made-up name. It's a rech. It's mean first three alphabets of the rehabilitation. Tus mean Mongolian words support. Tus. So this is the
Okay.
made-up name. So
So Rectus. And it's at
yes,
rectus.com. Do you have a website?
yeah. It's, you just Google up and then Rectus Mongolia, and then you'll find out all information about my company and what we did for last 7 years. Wow,
Great.
it's already 7 years. I set up my company.
Congratulations.
Thank you. The early anniversary. But when I just came back from Switzerland and back in 2013. So now it's nearly 7 to 8 years. We do provide a lot of ADL stuff. We can do that, but just the question is about the finance,
Yeah.
definitely. I stopped my any kind of charity works, so it's purely business, but the social issues addressed in business, so it's kind of social entrepreneurship.
Social entrepreneurship. That's correct. Yeah, that's
Yes,
totally right.
my company and I do work for creating inclusive and accessible environment. One of the greatest things, biggest things what we did is we completely turned up the Ministry of Social Welfare building to become it more accessible. We made the stair lifts, we made all ramps, we made all thresholds get the easy to for wheelchair users. We made a tactile pathway for people with visual impairments.
Right.
So our company is kind of focused on that. Now I also working with the property agencies to advocating new builders, new owners of the construction companies to build the buildings inclusive for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm doing it because also I graduated like a New York University Buffalo Institute on Universal Design course.
Wow.
So
Okay,
I'm
I didn't know
trying.
that.
I'm trying to be turning Mongolian society not only accessible, turning it to be more inclusive for everyone.
Inclusive,
Not,
right?
yeah, not only Oidov, but future Dorj, future Dolma, who is getting older, who got my impairments. And for some ladies who got just pregnant, who I mean, pregnancy is some
Oh, of
considered
course,
somehow
yeah.
also one of
They
the
need,
impairments, dysfunction. So
yeah. They need accessible transportation. They need accessible. They need workplaces that are accessible. They need to be
yeah,
included
so
in universities.
yeah,
And
so
we didn't.
Oidov's goal,
We,
Oidov's goal and Rectus goals is not turning up everything accessible, it's turning up everything inclusive for everyone.
inclusive, very much so. And I know it occurs to me we didn't talk about. We spoke only about physical disability here, but there's also a wider range of disability that we could talk
Indeed.
about as well. But that, I would have to probably save that for a separate conversation. This has been fantastic. I'm really glad we had a chance to speak today. And, you know, I was inspired. I found you an inspiring individual even before we had this conversation. Now, especially so hearing about all the things you're doing and the way you've contributed and some of the hopes you have, and this big project that the Asian Development Bank is doing, among other organizations, recalling the Achilles Running Club and some of these groups of Special Olympics that are in Mongolia, I'm feeling hopeful. As you said, the grass is starting to grow. We don't have the trees yet, but the grass is starting to grow. And I
Yeah,
think that's something.
I also crossing my fingers, and I have still not losing my hope that somehow someday Mongolia will be very equal for everyone and inclusive for everyone. But that's somehow we have to come up to that point area because we have so small population and losing 1/3 of our population just because of disabilities. It's too big luxury for Mongolian society actually.
That's right.
So we have to
Okay.
really be pragmatic on that. It's not about only human rights issues. It's actually the survival of the Mongolia as a whole country to use every member of the society fully and efficiently. And that's how we have to go. Otherwise Mongolia will be big trouble in a few years later.
That's right. Well,
Because
I'm going to
because
leave you
number
with the
of
last word. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
because the number of disabled, that's what I'm saying now. It's a kind of paradigm shift, Ariel. Looking at disabilities issues from the point of human rights, it's all the way. It's a kind of dogmatic. Now we should look at the people with disabilities on a more efficient human capital way.
I'm,
That's
I
that's
personally
the
see it both
Mongolian
ways.
vision.
I'm a big
Yeah,
supporter of human rights, so I do see it as a human rights issue. You just have people that are part of a unique community; they should be accepted, is my view. But you're right. You know, workers are losing. I mean, employers are losing money. Why dismiss talent? Why lose that input that they could provide you with their work, with their effort, with their time, with their perspectives, when it's, you know, it's wasteful in terms of human capital as well.
it is.
Um,
It is a big loss.
yeah, for the economy. Um, it's been 45 minutes. I love this conversation. I could keep going, but we scheduled it for 30 minutes. So this we already are a bit beyond. Looks like the sun's come out over there in Mongolia. But
Yeah.
I need to get to my daddy duties over here. The kids here, I've disrupted their evening enough. Thank you very much, Tandamashik Barla. Very happy to have spoken to you. I'm going to wish you a good night. Let's stay in touch, and I'm going to put your company's name here in the. It's REH TOS
Rectus, and
Company
you can put
Mongolia.
my email address. It's if you want. It's okay. Whoever
I'm
wants to contact me is welcome.
well. They know who you are. I think they should. I think instead of putting your email address up publicly, people can contact you in Facebook Messenger, just direct message.
Yeah,
All
Well,
right.
it's a great honor for me to be interviewed by you, Arya, because I heard about you for many years and had a few conversations with you, and now publicly interviewed by you. I feel very lucky with that.
I'm just a guy. You're doing all the work. I'm just letting other
Yeah,
people know
yeah,
about it. You know, I see myself as the bridge. I'm just a bridge. You get to get from
yeah.
one set there, somebody here and somebody here. Why don't I just connect you? Walk across my back. I don't have anything to offer other than the connection. Um, I'm going to wish you a good day and a good weekend. Thank you very much for
Thank you
being
so
on, and
much.
thank you for all you do. Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you, Serge. Bye.